Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Herding Cats. Tonight, we once again have with us Rodney Black, publisher of the Cats software program, which rides on JMRI. And tonight, Rodney is going to talk to us a little bit about the new release of JMRI, which is due this month. They hoped to get it out last month, didn't quite make it. And along with that release will be a new release and some new functionality within Cats. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rodney.
Okay, let me get my screen sharing going. Okay.
Yep, you're up.
Okay, great. Good. Glad you guys can see that. Okay, so again, good evening to everybody here in the States, and hello to all of you who are not in the States or will be reviewing this on a recording. But this is brand new year, and I think this kind of represents what last year was like. At least it sure feels like it to me. Hopefully 2021 will be better, and we'll be able to get back to doing things like going to train shows and conventions and meeting with our friends. So first presentation of 2021. And as Jerry was saying, I'm going to talk about Cats Release 2045 here. That's sequentially the next one. There's no real significance in the number 2045 other than it came after 2044. So the contents of this next release will be, it's going to come out sometime in January. And I put question marks there because as Jerry was saying, typically what the JMRI people do is they try to do a release every 6 months, a production release. And typically that is June and around the December timeframe. So when Jerry and I got together and we said, let's do this presentation, I was hoping that the next JMRI production release was out, and it's not out yet, but it should be almost any time. And I'm going to hold up this release of Cats until after JMRI is out, just in case they change something on me that breaks Cats, so that we only have to do one release and not confuse people. So this next release will have in it designer version 2.15, Cats version 242, and train style 107, and these should all work together. So let's with that, let's just do a quick preview of what we might see in JMRI 4.22. As I mentioned, it's not released yet. It's I would expect it almost any time. The latest test release is 4.21.3, which I will be using for my demonstrations here. I know there's some talk when 4.21.3 came out that they said that the production release would soon follow, but I haven't seen anything on the user groups about when it might come out next. So again, it's imminent. And looking through the release notes, what I found, first of all, that the thing that jumped out to me was that the layout editor has been refactored. And that's a technical term for saying that it's been redesigned. That's kind of a red flag right there, because I can guarantee you some things won't work the same. So if you're using layout editor panels, be careful, they may break. So keep your eyes open. That's kind of the bad news. The good news is the redesign that they're doing may open some things up, and maybe Cats can get some hooks in, use some hooks into some more things in JMRI. And that's the hope. And I haven't looked at the changes yet to see exactly if that's possible or not. The other bad news of that is I can guarantee you the Cats will not work. The previous versions of Cats won't work the 422 because of the changes that were made. Some things moved and you fire it up, and as soon as you try to load Cats panel, it's going to crash on you real bad. Another thing that's in the 422 release is that that preferences are loaded differently. And the warning then on their web page is that scripts not derived from JMRI apps may not work. Cats is derived from JMRI apps, so I don't think that's going to apply to Cats, and all the testing I've done so far, I haven't seen any troubles. Just within the last couple of days, I've been seeing some discussion about changing how panels load and store. this has always been a rather sore subject with JMRI. About every 6 months, somebody says, "Hey, I don't understand what's happening," and they go around and around, and they'll make some changes. So I'm going to stay out of this, but it just looks like a bad place for anybody to get involved in. But anyway, so be aware that you may see some changes if you do load and store some panels. And of course, read the release notes, because this is just the stuff that I see that affects cats, and there are other things on various command stations and things like that that are going to have some changes. So,
Rodney,
yeah,
you
yeah,
got the mic just a little bit too close. So if you get
too
it about
close.
6, yeah, there. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to distort things either. Okay, thank you. So let's talk about enhancements to Designer. There were some bug fixes, but they were fairly minor. And I've got basically three big enhancements in the CATS production suite. First of all is I've added flexible triggers for approach lighting on signals. And I'll demonstrate how all this stuff works and how you set it up here in just a few minutes. I now allow the ability to associate a JMRI reporter with a detection block. And you know, these are just things for changing the CATS panel. And the designer changes. They don't. They're basically just like GUI changes. Okay, and then the final one is I allow CATS to be a train stack client as well as a server. The way these things reflect themselves into CATS is that the flexible triggers allow for approach lighting on signals. Again, I'll go into this a little more detail. And the reporters allow train labels to move in response to RFID, transponding, real command, things like that. So the external things can position train labels on the CATS panel. Then the train stack client piece will allow CATS to be a train stack client as well as a server. You don't want to do both on the same CATS instance. So this change is really directed for those people who have large layouts and multiple CATS computers. The prototype would call them different desks. And the idea then is that any CATS can do anything that they're all basically equal in what they see and what they can do. And a fallout of that then, and really the motivation behind it was that a CATS client can receive a train location report from other CATS, which means that the labels move between panels. In other words, you get kind of a handoff of a train from one CATS machine to another. So let me start out by demonstrating the flexible approach lighting. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a CATS here. And I've got my little cheat sheet so I can do magnification if we need to. And I want to run this profile. Okay, and I'm going to open. And I've got a particular special file I've been using this on. There we go. So it's very simple. I've got 3 passing sidings connected with a single track with intermediates. Let's do a real quick look at the designer for that. Come on. There it is. Oops, too much. And the important thing I want to point out is I've got intermediate signals here, which would be right there, and here, which is right there. And those will be the signals that will be approach lit. Okay, so I'm going to put this back up here. And oops, good old Windows. And I want to open a couple of tools, a couple of tables, First one I want is sensors because I'm not hooked up to an actual layout. So I'm going to fake uh, I do want that up there. I'm going to fake it moving, and the train's moving. And I also want to look at signal heads. There we go. Okay, so all my sensors. Let's see if I can blow this up. Where is it? Escape plus. Let me try. Okay, see if this works. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's this one. Still don't get it. I had this working. There it is. Okay, so what we've got is a little too much. There we go. So I don't have the turnout states, so I'm going to have to set a few, and I'm going to look at the intermediates in particular, which is these guys. So this is what would happen if, when you fire it up, you might write a script or something that sets the sensors to what their inactive states are. So what we want to look at, actually, I'm going to have to go back. This is too big. I can't show you what I want to show you. So let's go back to escape, window escape. There we go. Okay, so I hope you guys can see it. Okay, the important thing to look at is, okay, first of all, that one's on. I want to inactivate it. There we go. So we don't have anything in here. But the thing to look at are these two signal heads. These correspond to these two down here. And notice the lit field on them is off. So this is the way CATS has worked in the past. Train detects on one of them, and the signal lights up that is right behind the detection block. In other words, this block detects, therefore this signal lights up. That's fairly classical approach lighting. And then train would go to that one, and now you got both of them lit up. And then as the train passes, they turn off. But now let's look at down here. I'm going to look at these two. This is I'm using the flexible signal lighting, and the idea is on many of the prototypes they will do approach lighting where they turn off the signal heads if they're not being used, so to speak. There's no trains around, simply because if you're running off batteries, your batteries go longer. You also preserve the lifetime of incandescent bulbs and things like that. But when they do approach lighting, what some railroads will do is they'll turn on just the signal that are facing the detected block. Other railroads will turn on all the signals, for example, between control points. Sometimes in both directions, and sometimes if you got multiple tracks, all the tracks. So that's the audience that this feature is intended towards. So we go down here and I turn on this one. Our signals we want to look at, are these two right here. So I turn on that one. And notice that both signals are now lit. So they turn on, and you can do that, and they're still on. As long as one of them is on, as long as there's detection in one of the blocks, you're going to get the signals will be lit. Okay, so with that, let me go back to my PowerPoint. There we go. And here's how you set that stuff up. So the first thing you need to do is check the approach lighting checkbox in the signal template. This is the way things have always been done. I noticed that approach lighting has worked and failed and worked and failed in CATS, and I think I wasn't very good about making sure I carried my bug fixes through. Then the next thing you do, if you want to use the flexible piece, then you have to define the trigger. And if you're doing something like a conditional on, you want multiple blocks to be able part of the trigger, then you have to do something like logics. So go into that a little more. This is the signal template. That's the checkbox you have to check. And again, that's been there for eons, so to speak, long time in cats. What's new is that if you have that checked and you pick a template, which that is checked, when you do the details, you have the signal head definitions. This whole section down here is brand new. So this is where you put in the definition for giving you for the trigger on the approach lighting. If this box is checked, then you get the classic behavior where it uses the detector block only in front of the signal. If this is not checked, then you can fill in some decoder information here. So this is the piece that's optional. Now here's how you would create the logics for it. You go into Panel Pro, start out in Panel Pro, and from Tools, Logics, and you would create a new logics. Through the select, then you could edit the thing, and you give it a name, stuff like that. And then you would edit this, and you come up with, this is the actual conditional, and all it's saying is if this detector is false, or this detector is false, then you do these things down here. So you'd have to do a little bit of logics. And you can make it as complicated as you want. You can throw in ors and ands and all kinds of stuff in there for it. So that's basically how you might do the flexible approach lighting. Okay, let's talk about JMRI moving train labels, and I'll show you how that works. Let's go back to, again, back to my sample diagram. And instead of signal heads down here, I want to look at reporters. Okay, let's see. Should give me that. There they are. Okay. So what we need to do, you've got trains. I've enabled the transponding field on the trains. I'll show you how to do that in a few minutes. And let's do, say, a westbound train. Pick that field and give it a reporter ID. We'll do, make it sleepy. We'll make it triple Z's. Then let's say he's on the main block in the client section. So go to client, main reporter, and you'll see train number 1 now appeared. And he'll move if train number, let's say he moves so that the reporter would stop reporting. Notice it stays there. So in other words, the label gets positioned only when the reporter reports something, not when it gets removed. So the train then could move to client intermediate 2, which would be this one. And see that moves. And if it goes up to here, it keeps moving. And it since I didn't have any transponding fields that were like AAA or anything like that, if you get a false, notice nothing changed. Okay, so that's basically the way this works. We'll go back to our slides. Yeah. I want to make it false. There we go. And let's do. Okay, so the way you do this is you define JMRI reporters in the CATS detection blocks. Then you add the reporter values in trains transponding. So this is new. And when you describe a detection block, I've added this subpane in here, and it will only take the decoder address for a JMRI reporter of some form. And you, of course, give it a good username. And the way you set it up in the trains is, and this is the same whether you're in, pretty much the same whether you're in Designer or CATS. You do the train pull down, you got the edit. That gives you something like this. or I'm sorry, edit train field. This is designer. You can only do this in designer. You do the edit train fields. That gives you something like this. And this is the line you're interested in, the one that talks about transponding. So when you want to make sure that it's visible over here. And then when you click on edit trains, you get this, and that's what the connection. So by making this visible, you get this column. If all your trains, let's say you're transponding, your RFIDs are static, in the sense that you have the same trains, have the same engines, and you don't move engines between trains, then you would fill this in on the train, and then you could turn make the transponding invisible, and then nobody can change the transponding when you actually do your the transponding value when you do your operating session. So this is the way that standard way that these fields work. Okay, a couple things that get kind of interesting. One is that you could have the same transponding value on multiple trains. And if you do that, in that case, what happens is CATS will find the active, it'll try, first of all, looks for an active train and use that as the a train to position on the reporter. And the active train typically means it has a crew and it's positioned on the panel. So after it's on the panel, then this reporters kick in and the label will move around. If it can't find an active train, then it'll find the first train that has not run and position it on the panel. And if you can't find a train that has not run, then it's going to find the first train found. Typically that's if it's been terminated or tied down. So those are the only things to be aware of with the block reporters. So let's look at TrainStat as a client, CATS as a TrainStat client. So now this is pretty much the same on Designer and CATS. You got under network, you got a screen that looks something like this. This piece sets TrainStat, the CATS version, as a TrainStat server. And here, if you click on this, you'll get another, basically a network type blocks to fill in, and that's how you connect, set up CATS as a TrainStat client. And you don't want a version of CATS to be both the client and the server. That won't work. To show you what I'm going to, my demonstration a little more, here's what I've got. Again, it looks very similar, track plan to what we had earlier. But what I'm going to do is this is what I started with. And what I did was I split it into two pieces. In other words, I copied it twice. And in one piece, I removed the left-hand side. In the other piece, I removed the right-hand side. And I'm going to run one version of CATS on my desktop, and I'm going to run the other version on the Raspberry Pi. Then I put these tracks on both of them. So this is the shared tracks. Here's where you'd hand off a train from one desk to the other desk. On the server, my desktop, for JMRI, I'm going to use the LocalNet simulator because I don't have it hooked up to a track, and I'm going to use LocalNet over TCP server to exchange the LocalNet information between the two computers. On CATS, I'm going to turn on TrainStat server, and I can turn on TrainStat if I wanted to. On my Pi, I'm going to use, for my JMRI configuration, it'll be LocalNet over TCP as a client so that these two will talk to each other. And then I'm going to do a TrainStat client on the Pi. And let me go back and show you how that all works. Let's get rid of that. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this stuff. So give me a minute here. And let's get rid of this one while we're at it. Okay, bring up CATS again on the desktop. So this is going to be the master. You can only have one master in your system. And I'm going to use a different profile. This will take a little bit to fire up because it's starting up the LocalNet over TCP network connection. And this is pretty standard. just about the time you think that it's going to fail on you, it'll blink and then it'll come up just like that. Okay, so let's open. And we need to do same place I put the others. And this time I want my network server local here. So there it is. And things we want to look at, we need startup train stat server here. Notice it's checked now, it's on. We got some trains we can look at. Okay, and the other thing I want to do here is I want to bring up the sensors, because again, I'll fake the trains moving between across the layout. So here's one desk. Let's bring up, we use a virtual network client, and I'm going to bring up connect to my Pi. There. Okay, so we're up on the Raspberry Pi, and bring up cats on the Raspberry Pi. And here it comes up. So now I've got JMRI. My JMRI is talking to each other, and I need to load a cats panel here. And I'll bring it this way. And we want this one to be a client. There it is. So I'm going to put this down. Let me leave that alone for a minute. So client just came up, and notice there aren't any trains in here. So we need to connect the two cats together. We'll go down to the train stat server connection option down here. And let me enter the address. I think I got that right. And we should see some trains. Oop, okay, what did I do wrong? Oh, I know I did wrong. I forgot to check the box. And you see all the same trains that we had on the desktop. Now I'm going to bring these across just so we can see them. Okay, so let's do let's position a train here on the west desk, and that's called server intermediate detection, which would be right here. That's where he's at. So the train is there, and we'll position a train there. And since he's going eastbound, we'll make it eastbound limited, number 2. Train then moves to the shared left, like that. He vacates the intermediate, like that. Now, okay, then he's going to move to the shared bottom. And watch what happens on these two screens when that becomes active, or when the detection kicks. You see, now the trains are duplicated. So he's on both screens of the dispatcher. And the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to flip that, and then I need to bring my windows back. There we go. And then he vacated the shared left, like that. Train continues on, so now he's going to be on the shared right detection. He moved, and then he vacates that one, and the train just continues moving on his merry old way. Like that. And let's reverse him, just show you it goes back. It can go back from the client back to the master. There he goes. Train's still moving. Then we need to go shared bottom. And notice the train now is again on both, the label is on both panels. And he goes then to the shared left. and vacates the shared body. So, okay, I'm going to minimize that, and I'll get rid of this and bring back my PowerPoint. Come on. Got it. Sometimes it takes a while to shut down too, and I think it's because of local net over TCP. And so there's my shared. And that's about all I've got for discussion tonight.
I'm going to get my unmute here.
Okay,
All right. Thank you, Rodney.
Let me unshare my screen.
Okay.
As I find the right widget. I'm having trouble finding the where's full screen. I'm not finding the right widget. Oh, here it is. Okay.
There we go. All right, so that's a lot of new features. I mean, my mind is kind of spinning here, thinking about implementing all that. I mean, it looks like kind of like the signal head thing when you originally deal with that. It's got a little bit of a learning curve to it, but there's a lot of power in those new features. So I'm kind of excited about it. The approach lighting will be a hit for a lot of people. And I think the multiple train stat setup would have great implications for modular groups, I would think, if they were trying to use CATs. And the one thing to clarify for the less geeky users, you demonstrated having the train stat client running on a Pi. You know, a lot of people hear that and they're like, I'm not going to get into that. But that just as easily could have been a tablet or a Windows computer or whatever, anything that the CATs will run on. So just to clarify that for everyone. So what kind of questions do you have out there? Don't be shy.
So my question is to Rodney on some of his first screens where there's triggers where it says green, yellow, red, and I guess it's nothing showing at all. There's different addresses there, LT addresses, and some of them are the same. Is that correct? Or is that something each one of them actually get a separate address?
Each one should have a separate address.
Because you got two 155s and two 154s, which to me sounds like there's not knowing anything enough about it. Sounds like that would be in wrong because what the triggers would be the light-its. Is that correct, Jerry? In NCE, would the light-its be the triggers where that address comes from?
I think the addresses would be the address that's required to make that color, and the reason it's subtle, but I'm used to setting up Digitrax SEHCs for
and I understand that. So, is anybody using NCE?
The deal here is it was the same address, but one was open and one was closed.
Right, because that's the way that the SEHC does its colors. That's why they're the same. And yes, I do know of people who are using light-its. And I think when they do it, then each color would be a different address.
That is correct. That is how I understand it. So that would be entered into CATs and those locations where you had your LT numbers.
Yes.
So the triggers are actually the light-its in my case, in that situation. All right.
Anybody else?
Who
So,
else is, who else is using Lidits from NCE? Just see David over there?
Um, I know Mickey McNutt. I think he contacted you, Dave. He was having troubles.
That was addressed to you, Inspector Dave.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, when was that? About a month or so ago?
Oh, no, probably more like 2-3 months ago.
Yeah, well, I'm lucky I can remember what the hell I did yesterday, but somebody contacted me, you're right.
No, there are people using Lidix, and it seems like there's an initial curve, but after they get over that, I don't hear them again.
Right. Once you establish the communication and how you get that Lidit to work correctly for your situation, the rest is a breeze. But you don't want to read the simple instructions and rely on those for everything.
so how many of you guys are using SE8s?
Using what?
SE8C, I think he means. It's a Digitrax.
Yeah, the Digitrax product. All right. I haven't done any signaling myself yet, physically on the layout, and I'm presuming I'll go with SE8s. All my other
There's a
stuff
lot
is
of work being
Digitrax.
done lately with those LED chains that you can get, for the Internet of Things. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's like you can have 1,000 lights on a strip and you can address each one individually. And
Wow.
if you want to go a cheaper way, than the Digitrax, there's a guy that's got a channel called the Internet of Toy Trains. It's Hans Tanner, who developed Winlope, which was sort of a predecessor to JMRI.
Oh yeah.
He's
Yeah.
got a whole series on that, and I can't remember what the technical name is for it. Maybe one of you tech people will remember better than I, but it's a standard interface. It's like used mostly for like shelf lighting and for controlling these huge LED strips. Like if you're trying to control the lighting in your whole layout, but you can actually you can use individual LEDs and make signals out of them, and you can address. So Seth, you're familiar with what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I mean, Hans Rudy's really interesting. I've been meaning to take a weekend and just binge watch. I don't know how much of that Swiss sing song I can listen to at once.
Yeah, I hear you.
But it's brilliant stuff. He's mostly in the local world, a little bit in LCC. I think we could probably build something that would talk to CMRI nodes by.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's gotten pretty universal with it, so I think they're looking at Wi-Fi communication and MQTT brokers and things like that. So it's pretty generic.
He's running ESP32s on the Wi-Fi to do all the comms.
Yeah, and he's got the little node whatever sticks, and so to me that's a huge benefit. That it uses the broker. The broker's very nice because everybody can talk to it without a whole lot of changes or work. And it's a nice, simple publish and subscribe system. So it's a lot simpler to deal with than LCC. And, everybody can kind of get there. I frankly think, once somebody just needs to publish one standard set of topics and say, you can do anything you want, but this set of topics is going to work. And I think it'll gel. Honestly, I think it's kind of the future.
Yeah, and
I get confused by that guy though. Like he just overwhelms me.
Well, yeah, and he also talks about 250 a minute, so you have to kind of stop.
Yeah, you got to stop and watch the video 4 times later.
Yeah, but the signal to noise ratio is high.
Yeah, yep, I'm there.
And for the benefit of the people that'll be watching this video later, we've got a number of exceptionally smart people in this group. So they're talking about a lot of things and referencing it as simple. Yeah, these are things you don't have to learn how they work if you know somebody that knows how they work. Uh, Best thing you can find is a friend on the internet to help you with your configuration, and you'll pick up the technical part just by proximity at some point, but shouldn't scare you off.
Yeah, Jerry, that's a good point, and I didn't realize it was. I know it says it's being recorded. I just didn't think of it that way. I just thought it was more of an internal chat. So to bring it down home, somebody did mention the Digitrax SE8C. That's the exact. And LocalNet will work even with non-Digitrax equipment. I've helped. In fact, the West Bay Club down there in the Bay Area, they've got all NCE for all their command stations, but they're using the LocalNet as their signaling backbone. So to make it simple for the people who might be listening and are not techie kind of people, the SE8C is a good box for I won't say a beginner. It's very powerful. You can have 32 different lights on one board, but the beauty of it is JMRI supports it directly. You can just get the board, sort of plug and play, hook up your signals, and CATS communicates very well with it. So if you want to buy that board, you basically program it to have an address. Each board has to have its own address. And then by default, all of the different signals get addresses that are based on that. And you can name them in JMRI. So, and I learned this from Rodney when I started using CATS. So I didn't have to keep looking back and forth to what all my addresses were. You can actually refer to it. For example, to use your example, but a little more familiar, east siding signal west and east main signal west. You call them like things like that in your JMRI code, and then when you're in CATS, you can call it by that same name. And as long as you've matched it, the lights come up and work. So yes, to your point, Jerry, for people who are not wanting to learn about new cutting edge technologies, and then thank you, Seth, for the reminder. It's called the NeoPixel. You're right, and I was somehow having a brain fart on that, but it isn't all unapproachable. In fact, one of the things that Rodney and CATS did for me personally was made it easy. I didn't have to go into Panel Pro and design every single little detail and make it look, a certain way. All I had to do was download Rodney's program and have all the addresses entered, for my turnouts and my sensors and such as that, and bang, it kind of works. So yeah, I'm glad you brought us down to earth there, Jerry, because I was getting a little esoteric.
And no problem. And I'm mainly a
I'd add to
Digitrax
that.
guy, and
Oh,
I learned
sorry.
how to use the BDL boards for detection. There was a little bit of a learning curve. Well, the SE8Cs, are kind of similar. They have a board address, and then you got a separate address for every location that you're detecting. So just to parallel that, I'm probably going to use Digitrax. What about Atlas? Has anybody used the Atlas system?
Have you
Jerry, can
seen the
I
cost
throw
of
in
the Atlas?
another?
I'm sorry. Have you seen the cost of the Atlas system?
I haven't even looked at it. I just know that a lot of novices tend to look at one of those big names like Atlas. Just like Walters has their own control system.
One of the control boards sells for like $30 a piece, so it doesn't do a whole lot.
Yeah.
So
Jerry, I think that the time's coming where you don't have to go with brand A or brand B or brand C.
Yeah, it is mixing.
Really, things like CATS can allow you to have detectors from one manufacturer and signals from another and point motors from another. And it'll all sort of hang together. So you don't have to lock yourself into a brand and have a mindset that if I'm Digitrax guy, I'm Digitrax and I'm not moving off it. I got like 6 different DCC systems and I can make them talk together. They will work.
That's a good point.
You just get annoying about it.
Yeah,
like as long as you keep your addresses consistent. My experience is the same, Mark. I have actually used it. Well, I don't want to get again, but it's not all Digitrax. I have LocalNet stuff, but some of it was built created by Team Digital. Some was created by Circuits. Some of it is from Seth's group. So or at least some of the hardware I'm interfacing to it. So it's really, to your point, as long as it speaks DCC and has an address, it'll work.
Yeah,
And that's a good
exactly.
point for the novices, because 10 years ago it was very much, if you're Digitrax, you're Digitrax, if you're NCE, you're NCE. But that stuff is mixing, and in fact, this may be an oversimplification, but it almost seems like LCC, part of its origination was for all the systems that had LocoNet envy. They didn't have a bus like that, and they built it, and like you said, Steve, people are running a LocoNet bus on top of their NCE in some cases, because it was a good solution.
Me.
Yeah, Mark
Yeah,
said that. Okay.
It's kind of the great,
Yeah.
Babelizer. You can have as many interfaces of different kinds, and in most cases, multiple of the same, and you just mix and match whatever you want. So if somebody comes up with, Chuck Catania used to say, if they come up with a 1952 Hudson interface, you just find the interface for that and plug it in, and now your NCE and LocoNet and whatever else you want will talk to it.
Well, Rodney's done such a good job of doing it for us. Thanks, Rodney. You did it well. You
Absolutely.
kicked butt.
Absolutely.
I got to give credit to the JMRI guys. They're really what makes it work. And by opening up the device interfaces for sensors and stuff like that, that makes it easy.
Yeah, but I got to
Yeah,
tell
but
you,
you
Rodney,
still make it hang together.
I said I don't have physical signals yet, but just from the traffic, building the console itself, and doing the detection and doing the turnouts and the interlocking for protection and all that stuff, I modeled a Pensi. I've got a 4-track main line. So when you have a full interlocking, you've got 6 crossovers. And in one case, there's also a yard entrance. So you try to do the logic for that in Panel Pro, and you're scratching your head, but you go do it in CATS. It's a slam dunk because the interlocking is all done in the background. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I don't want to do the interlocking. No, never.
Okay, any more questions or comments about tonight's presentation?
Yeah, when are you going to put it on the web? Because I was late. I missed the first 15 minutes, and that sucks.
Well, I'm going to have it
Yeah.
on later tonight, but I'm going to block your IP so you can't see it.
Oh, right. You're
Now,
just going to
it'll-
block us Aussies.
Yeah, there you
Keep
go.
the Australians out.
GeoIP the whole continent. No, it'll probably be up sometime tomorrow.
Yeah, the CATS itself,
Thursday at the latest.
Yeah, the next release of CATS will probably be up shortly after the next production version of JMRI. And I have not seen a date on that yet.
Okay, should be soon though.
Oh,
All right,
just
well,
by the way, Rodney, while I've got you, thanks for the email. I haven't done anything about it, but I'm under a tad of pressure from other sources to get my shit together and get it finished.
You're welcome.
So yours is a future edition.
So Rodney, I got a tangent question for you. If TrainStat is collecting all the times and the presence of trains at a particular location, you've got the stations in a columnar format. For somebody that wanted to dig into the XML and learn how all that stuff is stored, would it be practical to retrieve that information? And if somebody wanted to print out a dispatcher sheet or a tower sheet from a session?
Yeah, actually, what you do is you record. When you start up your session, you turn on record, and then it records all the movements into a file, just a straight text file, no XML at all about it.
Oh, okay.
And then in the TrainStat document, there's a table that shows you how to decode it.
Oh, okay. So you just parse it out and
Yeah. And
interesting.
in fact, that's something I haven't turned loose, and I need to try it again, see if it works. Is I've got a little program that can do string charts based upon the information that comes out of one of those files.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at it from the perspective
that's cool.
of having scheduled times versus actual times for performance.
That's very nice. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I have a
Dave.
question. for
Yeah, I
Rodney.
like that too.
Go ahead, Dave.
Rodney. As far as your approach lighting goes, I noticed you didn't do any routes. You didn't click on a signal to clear a train ahead. If you got approach lighting and you route a train through, how does that work with approach?
It doesn't, it doesn't, they're totally independent. It works only on, well, it works primarily on detection.
Okay, so you want on a layout, when you're clearing a train to a certain area, you would route it on the panel. The train, because he's in the block, he sees his green board and then he takes off. The signals 3 or 4 miles down the line are dark because he ain't triggered them yet. But they would show what the dispatcher wanted him to do as far as going to a certain location then, correct? And then they would just shut back off again when he's out.
Right. So they would turn on when they're in the, perhaps, again, depending on how you set up the approach lighting, you definitely want them on in the block in front of the signal, but then you could do it more. And in fact, if you wanted to, that's the flexibility of the approach. If you want to get more sophisticated, you could set something up such that you determine when a route has been set, and then put that as an input into the trigger for the approach lighting. So you could do that as well.
I'm assuming that's written in knuckle dragging language in the owner's manual.
Knuckle dragging, yes. Yeah, I do a lot of punting on that one. It's just basically, it's whatever you want to do. And unfortunately, then you, by and large, you'll have to probably get into either logics or do some Python scripting or something like that.
I have a question for Rodney. Rodney, is the new version going to be able to run under 4.2.0 production for JMRI?
No,
No.
no,
Okay.
because of the change they made in JMRI.
Okay.
I have a version, I did my initial testing under JMRI 4.2.0, but I don't think I'll turn it loose. I want to minimize the number of versions I got out there.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily being apt to go to 4.2.2 either, so that's what I was wondering. Thanks.
All right, last call. All right, thank you, Rodney. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rodney. Nice job.
Good
See you
evening.
guys in a couple weeks.
All righty.
Bye, thank
Thanks,
you.
Rodney.
Will do.